whatever path you are on, whatever inspired you to come here today, we honor you and we welcome you. And now, our message.
And if you would just join me in closing your eyes, and let's take a moment to just get centered and prepared for today's wonderful message. Recognizing that in order to activate change in our lives, we must experience a sense of openness. Openness to our divine. Openness to our own magnificence. Take a moment now with a deep breath. And on that exhale, just relax. Find yourself centered in peace. And recognize your absolute beauty and perfection. Take a moment to just feel that God center within you, that center of perfection, that center of wholeness. I join with each of you in recognizing the absolute beauty, wholeness, and magnificence that resides within each of us. And as we open our minds to hear our message today and to be inspired to create change and to see that beauty and wholeness within us and with everyone that we encounter in every day, we know that we grow in this amazing consciousness of absolute love. Starting with ourselves and expanding to our family and friends and to the entire world, we know that the magnificence, the beauty, and the love of God is within each and every one of us. And we release these words knowing that they are profound and true and that today ignites a brand new level of inspiration and growth within each of us. And together we say, and so it is.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm not sure, is my mic good enough?
Yes.
Is it too loud? Is it too ringy? Am I echoey? No? Hi, I'm Ali Benjamin, and I'm the director here at the Sati Center, and welcome. I don't know if we welcomed our newcomers, but if we have newcomers here today, if you would let us know, we have a little gift for you, so we'll be passing those out.
Raise your hand high.
Yeah, raise your hand just a little bit. There we go, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 4 packets. 4, 5. Yeah. So we've got a few. Welcome, welcome. It's so good to meet you. I know we haven't officially met. We will. And if you're back, welcome back. Thank you, Lyle. So the theme for this month is compassion. Compassion. And I find it to be quite synchronistic to have the theme be compassion this month, as it's also the cover of our Science of Mind magazine has a picture of the Dalai Lama on it. And another coincidence or synchronicity would be that he was due to come to Utah and speak at the Parliament of World Religions this month in Salt Lake City. Unfortunately, due to his health, he's not coming, but that the fabulous gathering of all the major faith traditions is happening in Salt Lake City. I think that's a really wonderful thing to know, that the religions of our world are coming together to listen to each other, to learn and learn to understand each other, and to not only honor the differences but embrace and celebrate the similarities that every faith tradition seems to have at its root. And so I think probably the biggest similarity of the faith traditions born out of those mystical roots is compassion. Last week I talked about a wonderful teacher and compassionate soul, Amma, known as the Hugging Saint. And I suggested that all of you take some time in the week to see what a difference that you can make in others' lives. Maybe it's with a hug, or maybe it's with something that you do. Something simple and heart-opening that you do or you create that offers and shares your compassion with the world. So today I'm moving my focus a little bit to sort of to activate change using our ability to have compassion and empathy. And I've been studying an organization out of Stanford University called the CCARE. I don't know if it's a foundation or branch, but it stands for the Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research and Education. So a lot of my information today has come from Dr. James Doty, who's the director of CCARE at Stanford. So what is compassion? Compassion literally means to suffer together. An emotion researchers said is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. So somebody asked me last week, why do you do what you do? What's your motivation? And as I was speaking of compassion, I thought, now, last week I shared what motivated Amma, growing up in a very poor region of India and seeing a lot of the villagers' struggles and suffering. And although everybody was in a similar socio-economic situation, she could see that there was a big difference from household to household. Some people were really positive and having an abundant experience and a happy life, and then there were others that weren't. So what was it that made some people suffer and some people not, given the same situations, the same resources, the same life? And so I thought, well, what is it that what is it about my story, my history, my past that inspired me to be a minister, that inspired me to choose a vocation of wanting to get up in front of people, to share an uplifting, positive message, a new thought message, to teach universal spiritual principles that could help people to live a life that they love living? You know, where did that come from? Because as an introvert, I know that might surprise some of you that know me, as an introvert, it's not easy to do what I do. And so what is this? Because typically in my life, I don't do things I don't like to do. So why do I do this thing? Why did I found a center? Why do I come here every Sunday and speak? Why do I put myself out there for judgment and criticism? And why do I say I'm an authority on these new thought principles? And just as I frame it up, I get a little bit nervous. And I think it really comes from my background, my growing up. I grew up in England. I'm 53, so I grew up in the 60s, and I had a very privileged upbringing. My parents were both very talented athletes, Olympic athletes, and we had money, and everything on the outside looked really great. But then there was me. I was an only child born of these two wonderful athletes that really felt alone. My parents both worked in the field of athletics, track and field and rowing, and I didn't see them very often. So I was raised with nannies, plural. They don't stay around too long. So nannies, and I didn't see my mother very much, and she left when I was 5. She moved to this country and I stayed in England. So I was really, I didn't feel a lot of love and care and compassion and kindness as a child. I really felt very lonely, and so I think that a lot of my motivation for wanting to help others comes from those early roots of feeling disconnected and uncared for. And it sort of continued on throughout my life. And as I started to become a rebellious teenager, I would look for love in all the wrong places. I was always one that would stand up for the underdog. And whilst that was really great, it led me to a challenging life, to where I made some life decisions that didn't necessarily, it just added to a challenging life. So I thought, well, I can see that we're all in this. We all have these paths of maybe we have really loving, caring parents, or maybe we don't, or maybe we were abused as children, or whatever happened. Maybe there was some crisis, whatever happened. Maybe you've lost someone. So we've all come out of these situations where we feel the need and the longing to connect with others. But many of us don't know how to ask for that connection. We don't know how to ask for love. And we maybe dim our light of compassion because we haven't yet fully received it ourselves. So I think we can cultivate compassion, and I think it's the very thing that is going to help us help humanity to take the evolutionary leap forward that is necessary at this particular time in our history and in our evolution. It's our ability to cultivate that compassion and to erase the boundaries and borders that we create in our lives, that society has us create by thinking of ourselves as other or different or separate, and learn how to embrace our oneness as a species. And I think that, so I will get on with my notes so I can give you all that I want to share with you today. Another thing about my path that where I did get a glimpse, and I'm sure many of you will feel similar, you'll relate to this. Even though I felt very alone, and I actually went to boarding school after my mother left, and my father sent me to boarding school when I was 7. I found that there was a few key people in my life that come to my mind and my heart very quickly right now as I think about people that modeled compassion for me. One was my neighbor. She was a beautiful woman, and her name was Barbara. And she lived right next door to us, and she was married to Dr. Pym, Barbara Pym, and they had 5 children. And so naturally, I was always over there, because being an only child, nothing was going on at my house. But over at the Pym's house, there was always lots of love and craziness, and everyone screaming and yelling at each other, and it was great. And Mrs. Pym would just, I would want to sit on her lap, and she would just stroke my hair and show me what it felt like to be mothered and to be loved. And I think, when I think of compassion, I think of her. And then when I was in school, I didn't learn to read until I was 9 or 10, having dyslexia. And there was a really sweet old matron. We have matrons at our boarding school. And she was this tiny little lady. She was really nasty and mean, but she was really sweet and compassionate too. And nobody saw that. I don't think many people saw it, but I did. She somehow spotted me, and she would pull me aside and teach me to read. And so I learned how to read from that lady. So I share that because although I don't really like sharing all of this personal stuff because part of me thinks it's not important, but I can see from your tears that it is. We just don't know the difference we can make in someone else's life by our simple, kind acts of compassion, whether it's reading to a child or just giving them a hug, because we just don't know. So I think those women helped to create this longing to help others, to really see the suffering that people have in their lives and want to do something about it. So it's not just me standing up here giving a message or teaching classes that I think this is my strategy to alleviate world suffering. It's in actually creating a center, to have a place where we have a Course in Miracles, where we have metaphysical discussion groups, where we teach classes, where we do events such as the Om Fest that we did a couple of weeks ago. It's in the attempt to create a loving community that comes together to maybe embrace the disenfranchised, to include those fringe groups that aren't included in mainstream communities, religions. And so it's not just what I'm doing, it's what we're creating as a community to help to bring this message of compassion to the forefront. Dr. James Doty from the CCARE at Stanford said, compassion unfolds in response to suffering, beginning with our recognition of it, then conjuring change to elicit empathy and concern. This, in turn, motivates us to take action and help relieve that suffering. Compassion arises both on the personal level of our individual relationships and on the global level of cultures and nations interacting with one another. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that the problems of the world, social, economic, environmental, and so on, are best understood and viewed through the lens of compassion. With compassion, our empathy for the suffering of others can give rise to altruism, bringing immediate and long-term happiness and tranquility into our lives. Humans have a natural capacity for compassion. However, everyday stress, social pressures, and life experiences can suppress it, potentially resulting in physical and psychological problems. The good news is that we can train ourselves to nurture others while developing our compassionate instinct. This process requires patience, steady care, proper tools, and a supportive environment. And that's what I believe that we're doing here. We're creating a supportive environment so that we can practice compassion. The Pope Francis was recently in our country, and he emphasized in his talk to Congress, he emphasized the Golden Rule. And as my husband Michael and I were talking about what to share with the children today, or the youth in the Empower program, I quickly ran to my bookshelf and got this book on the Golden Rule for kids. And so that's a very simple way we can communicate with our children compassion. And the Golden Rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And Pope Francis said, in referencing this, if we want security, let's give security. If we want life, let's give life. If we want opportunities, give opportunities. We are here to do unto others by giving of ourselves, by modeling and giving what it is that we want to see in the world. He also said the yardstick we use for others will be the yardstick which over time uses us. So we want to know that as we judge and as we measure other people, then that same yardstick will be used back to measure us. So if we can give and share of ourselves compassionately to support each other's growth and development, and I think that we could be the catalyst for change here in Ogden. I'm sure it's going on in lots of different churches this morning, the same similar message, but we are the catalyst for change. So let us be that activation for change in our community. So activating change, what can we do? Besides being compassionate and being kind and loving and caring, what is it that we can do? What can we do to stretch ourselves in our community? There's a Sanskrit word called seva, S-E-V-A. Seva translates as selfless service. It's my understanding that through seva, through volunteerism, through serving, we can create a big ripple of change. My stepmother modeled this for me. My stepmother, who married my father when I was 7, was such a loving, compassionate woman. And she struggled with a lot of depression. In those days, you would have to, if you struggled with mental illness, they would put you in an institution and give you electric shock. Well, Sheena, my stepmother, modeled for me the importance of seva. And her psychiatrists would encourage this kind of putting yourself out there, volunteering, helping those that are less fortunate. So maybe that's something that you could implement to put this compassion into service, is to practice seva, to find opportunities for you to serve those that are less fortunate, or those that could benefit from the gifts that you have. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you can share your creativity with the young or with the elderly. Maybe you love to read. Maybe you could become a part of a literacy program. My stepmother would do Writing with the Disabled. She would go to a local home in Oxfordshire where I lived called the Sue Ryder Home, and she would, there was this beautiful stables that had horses, older horses that were not as useful in their field of work as they used to be, or donkeys, and they would be trained to work with the disabled. And maybe there's something like that within our Ogden community that could support you in practicing seva, selfless service, and getting out of your own mind, because I think our minds are what really cause us the most suffering. It's when we come into our heart and we're actually able to give of our heart that we tap into that universal language of love and compassion that everyone speaks. We all speak it. We all love it. That's why I loved Mrs. Pym, stroking me, and matron Mrs. Knight teaching me to read. They spoke that universal language. So how can you speak that universal language of love and compassion in the community? Because what I know about giving in that way, when we give selflessly, without any expectation, without any attachment to the result, that isn't draining. Some people say, well, I don't have time to serve. I don't have time for volunteerism. I already work a full-time job. I've got 3 children. I've got my own problems. I don't have time for that. What I know about selfless service is that it opens up a deep reservoir of energy, and it doesn't feel taxing. It doesn't feel draining. It doesn't feel that you don't have enough time for it. because it is that universal language, and because there's something magical about the energy of selfless service, of compassion, that is infinite and eternal. The Dalai Lama said that the two wings to enlightenment are compassion and selflessness, altruism. That this is actually the mystical message for us to evolve as a species, for us to awaken, to become self-realized. It's to develop these two wings, love and compassion, and selflessness, service, helping others in spite of draining or taking from yourself, in spite of what it may say about you. So I found this interesting little piece as I was studying the CCARE, and they were talking about evolution. And so I thought that this would be something fun to share with you. I'm a big proponent of understanding. I grew up, I was born wanting to understand what the heck is going on here on this planet, who am I and how do I fit in, and I still don't really know, but I'm still seeking to find out what's really going on. So whenever science and spirituality come together and talk about evolution, it really turns me on. So Dr. James Doty said this: while science has made great strides in treating pathologies of the human mind, far less research exists to date on positive qualities of the human mind, including compassion, altruism, and empathy. Yet these pro-social traits are innate to us and lie at the very centerpiece of our common humanity. Our capacity to feel compassion has ensured the survival and thriving of our species over millennia. And the Dalai Lama said, the cultivation of compassion is no longer a luxury, but a necessity if our species is to survive. When one looks at our evolution as a species, we find it is that for us to have what is called the ability of theory of mind, to have the ability to think abstractly, to have the ability to have complex language, is required us to increase the size of our cortex, to increase our frontal lobes, increase our temporal lobes. As a result, there was a requirement that a woman's gestational period was prolonged. Litter size was decreased. There was an absolute requirement that our offspring took well over a decade before they could live independently. As a result of that, they developed extraordinarily strong bonding, nurturing pathways within our species. So what this is saying to me is that through our evolution, that we have developed, we have grown into beings that have been wired to be compassionate. Why is this? Why is it that we, at this particular time in our evolution, are waking up? Why are all these spiritual teachings coming up talking about compassion? We're learning to meditate, to understand that we're all one. It's because this very core teaching, this very thing that's been wired within us, is being called to be awakened. It's evolving in us. And we have to be able to nurture this so that we can take this next evolutionary step in consciousness. So how do we take this evolutionary leap? How do we move from these old ways of being, which in the past there was this fight and flight that we were aware of before we evolved into these beings that were more aware of our capacities to co-create our reality using our mind, using our heart. We're no longer in that fight and flight, that competition. We've evolved out of that. We've evolved out of that. so we can develop this. So as the Dalai Lama talks about that it's an absolute necessity for our species to understand compassion, he also says that it's the women of the West that will absolutely be the catalyst for bridging this gap, for creating this change. So I thought, okay, so the women of the West, why the women of the West? Why us? Because we have the freedom, the means. We have the voice. We're able to share this, and it is innate in us. Because we have the ability to give birth, because we know what it means to protect our young. And so I thought, well, we don't do this alone. We do this with our men. We do this together. So I found this really wonderful feminist poem that I wanted to read to you. It was written in 1973, but it really speaks very clearly today. It was written by Nancy Smith, and it's called For Every Woman. For every girl who is tired of acting weak when she knows she is strong, there is a boy who is tired of appearing strong when he feels vulnerable. For every girl who is tired of acting dumb, there is a boy who is burdened with the constant expectation of knowing everything. For every woman who is tired of being called an emotional female, there is a man who is denied the right to weep and be gentle. For every girl who is called unfeminine when she competes, there is a boy for whom competition is the only way to prove his masculinity. For every woman who is tired of being a sex object, there is a man who must worry about his potency. And for every woman who feels tied down by her children, there is a man who is denied the full pleasures of shared parenthood. For every woman who is denied meaningful employment or equal pay, there is a man who must bear full financial responsibility for another human being. For every woman who is not taught the intricacies of an automobile, there is a man who is not taught the satisfactions of cooking. For every woman who takes a step towards her own liberation, there is a man who finds the way to freedom has been made a little easier. We are all in this thing called life together. Let's lift each other up. Let's hold each other's hands. Let's be compassionate towards one another. And let us know, with the roles society has created for us as men and women, as all of that is kind of falling away now, in this new era, in this new time, we're being called, equality is being called for. We're stripping away our identities as men and women, as professionals, as whatever those roles that we may have taken on. And we're being asked to stand up as human beings, as the one human family, to have compassion for each other's conditioning, for the struggles that we've had, for our spiritual immaturity, our emotional immaturity. We're being asked to embrace that and be compassionate and meet each other where we are and pull each other up so that we truly can be the ones that this evolutionary leap can be activated through. So are you ready? Are you ready to be that one in your family that is willing to maybe drop some of those judgments, those lines in the sand that have been drawn between you and you know who? Somebody in your family, somebody in your world. Can you be those ones that can blur those lines and just show up with a compassionate heart that can meet those men and those women that have been conditioned to struggle? Let us breed, let us cultivate and nurture our children, our grandchildren, to live from compassion. Let us condition them to be enlightened, to have those two wings firmly established, firmly in place, so that they can be lifted up in self-realization through loving compassion and selfless service. That is my wish. Thank you. So I close with a prayer. And my particular brand of prayer is not a beseeching, it's not a begging. It's an activation of consciousness. So we start this activation of consciousness with the recognition that there is only one life, one power, one presence. Call it universal intelligence. Call it divine love, beauty. Call it whatever you will. This one power, this one presence, this one love is each one of us. It isn't out there somewhere, it's right here, in the very heart of my heart, in the very heart of all hearts. No one is immune from this. No one is excluded from this thing called love, God, Spirit, Divine Mind. And as we recognize and unify with that intelligence, we realize that our very word, our very thought is an activation of consciousness that has a ripple out effect. Because consciousness creates. Quantum physicists are proving this. Science is proving that our conscious awareness affects the physical matter of the universe. We are not separate from the physical universe. We are the physical universe, and we are the consciousness that is aware of the physical universe. So I speak these words now with intention. And my intention is to activate the laws of the universe to respond to these words directly. I know and accept for each of us that we are activating compassion within our hearts and our minds right now. We activate compassion through all that we do, through all that we are. We activate compassion through every deed, through every act, through every thought, and through every word. I know and accept for each of us that we take this awareness out into our worlds and into our families, that we allow those lines to be blurred, that any old judgments that aren't serving us simply dissolve. For any hard, rigid mindsets that no longer serve us, they're simply becoming less stuck. Anything that is in the way of us truly expressing our unique brilliance is simply diminishing as we speak and breathe now. I know and accept for all of us that we step each and every step that we take. We step in faith, we step in love, we step in service. And for this, we are blessed, our families are blessed, this center is blessed, and all beings are blessed. Let's just send a blessing out. May all beings be free of pain and suffering, and the root cause of pain and suffering now and always. May all beings be strong and powerful and healthy and happy, and may all beings live and love with ease now and always and in all ways. For this we are all blessed, and so it is.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence today and being a part of the Satya Center. You're invited to join Reverend Ali and Reverend Lyle each Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for your dose of connection, inspiration, and co-creation. The Satya Center is located at 795 24th Street, Ogden, Utah. For directions, a map, and our service times, please see our website, thesatyacenter.org. This program was brought to you by the kind donations from the members of the Satya Center. Thank you.